Judges 10. Early in the morning, Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all his men camped at the spring of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me. Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead." So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 remained. Okay, so most of us know how to do math. 22,000 plus 10,000, he started out with 32,000. But the Lord said to Gideon, "There are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will thin them out for you there. If I say, 'This one shall go with you,' he shall go. But if I say, 'This one shall not go with you,' he shall not go." So Gideon took the men down to the water. There the Lord told him, "Separate those who lap the water with their tongues, as a dog laps, from those who kneel down to drink." 300 of them drank from cupped hands, lapping like dogs. All the rest got down on their knees to drink. The Lord said to Gideon, "With the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the others go home." So Gideon sent the rest of the Israelites home, but kept the 300 who took over the provisions and trumpets of the others. So from 32,000 men to 300 men. Now the camp of Midian lay below him in the valley during the night. The Lord said to Gideon, "Get up, go down against the camp, because I'm going to give it into your hands. If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah, and listen to what they are saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged to attack the camp." So he and Purah, his servant, went down to the outposts of the camp. The Midianites, the Amalekites, and all the other eastern peoples had settled in the valley, thick as locusts. Their camels could no more be counted than the sand on the seashore. Gideon arrived just as a man was telling a friend a dream. "I had a dream," he was saying. "A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed." His friend responded, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed down in worship. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out, "Get up, the Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands." Dividing the 300 men into 3 companies, he placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them, with torches inside. "Watch me," he told them. "Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp blow yours and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after they had changed the guard. They blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The 3 companies blew the trumpets and smashed the jars. Grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets they were to blow, they shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." While each man held his position around the camp, all the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. I just want to point out, this is like a silly way to win a battle, okay? I mean, because sometimes we read this stuff and we're like, okay, face value. But can we just stop and appreciate the fact that this is a silly, silly way to win a battle? And yet this is what God did. Torches and trumpets, guys. Torches and trumpets. I believe in God. I believe in this word. I know what God has done in my own life, and he does some silly things. He uses the foolish and small things of the world to confound the wise. When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. The army fled to Beth Shittah toward Zererah as far as the border of Abel Meholah near Tabbath. Israelites from Naphtali, Asher, and all Manasseh were called out, and they pursued the Midianites. Gideon sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites and seize the waters of the Jordan ahead of them as far as Beth Barah." So all of the men of Ephraim were called out, and they seized the waters of the Jordan as far as Beth Barah, and they also captured 2 of the Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. They pursued the Midianites and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was by the Jordan. All right, there's a reason I'm reading this to you. I'm going to share some things that have been going on with me. I've shared a lot of my testimony on this channel because that's what I'm doing right now. That is my role. As a witness, I am required to share with you for 1,260 days. Now, early on, when I first started doing this, I believed, and for a long time, I believed, okay, 1,260 days, I got to have something to share with you every single day. And technically, I would have something to share with you because I sit with God on a daily basis. But there are times, and this is the point of the witnesses. The point of the witnesses in Revelation 12 tells us that the witnesses do not love their life so much as to shrink from death. If you're unfamiliar with the witnesses, by the way, they are not two people, literally. The reason God uses two witnesses is because in his law, two or more witnesses are required in order to establish a matter. The witnesses are 144,000, a literal number, not a figurative number. Some people say a figurative number, but we know that in Revelation 7, that when the witnesses are talked about, the 144,000, God makes a point to say that they are 144,000, and then he makes a point to say 12,000 from each of the tribes, and he doesn't even just say that. He goes into each of the tribes. 12,000 from Asher, 12,000 from Dan. Each of those 12 tribes, it makes it a point of saying that. And then he talks about a multitude in white robes that no one could count. So do you think that he was using a figurative number when he said 144,000, and then he says, well, this was a number no one could count? Or that he went to all this effort to lay out how many from each tribe if this was not a literal number? It's a literal number. What you also know in Revelation 12 is that they have known that they are going to die. It hasn't been a surprise to them. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. And we know the function of these witnesses, first of all, that they are sealed before the first 4 trumpets blow, because when the 5th trumpet blows, Satan has lost his place in the heavenly realms. That's why in Revelation 9 you see him falling as a star from the sky when that 5th trumpet blows, and then he goes into the abyss. And you see in Revelation 11 that it says when he rises from the abyss, he overpowers and kills the witnesses. In Revelation 12, we know that there are 2 things that are required in order to triumph over the devil. The first has already been fulfilled. That's the blood of the Lamb. The second is the testimony of the 2 witnesses, or the figurative number of the 2 witnesses, literal number of 144,000 in the entire world. In Revelation 3, when speaking with the church in Philadelphia, one of the 2 lampstands, God refers to his witnesses as 2 lampstands, and he addresses those 2 lampstands in Smyrna in Revelation 2 and in Philadelphia in Revelation 3. Those 2 lampstands are bodies of believers. They're not 2 men, literally dressed in sackcloth, breathing out fire like a dragon. That isn't what the witnesses are going to look like. And indeed, it's not what they look like right now. Fire is the consuming fire of God. In Zechariah 4, it says, not by power, not by might, but by my spirit, says the Lord. He clarifies who the 2 witnesses are, that they are the 2 olive trees who are pouring out golden oil. They are not doing this ministry. It's not their ministry. They're not in charge of it. It's God doing it through them. And in Zechariah 4, it says, not by power, not by might. So not by me, but by God's Spirit, he's going to do these things, which means me as a vessel will be crushed. Okay, that's what that means. Me as a vessel, the witnesses as a vessel are going to be crushed in order to be used, because God doesn't need our power or our might or our ideas or anything else. What he needs is a willing vessel who is going to be broken for him so that he can actually use them. And guess what? If you are one of the multitude in white robes, you're going to be required to do the same. You're going to be required. You already are in your covenant. You're required to be broken so that he can actually use you. Because when you are strong, remember the example that Paul set for us. When we are strong, or when we have power and might, God's power is not able to rest on us because we believe in our own power. And that interferes with what God is actually doing. No one is righteous, guys. No one is righteous. And God has no use for anything that we could necessarily offer him except for our hearts, except for being a broken vessel for him to use. So the purpose of the witnesses is to share their testimony for 1,260 days. Now, When I first was understanding, and as I've been understanding with God regarding my role, I have done my very best to make every single day count. It doesn't matter if I've been with my kids. It doesn't matter if my kids are visiting, which my daughter is now with my grandson, because my daughter is pregnant and my grandson is a year and a half, and there are really bad fires over by their house. So they've been here and I've been helping with my grandson. But always, always on my heart is every day belongs to God. Every day. So what do you want me to do today? How do you want to use me? How do you want to crush me? What are you building right now for me to speak to your people? Every day that has been on my heart. Every single day. And to the fullest, I want to be used. And I know that I need to be used on every single day. I am literally referred to in Daniel as the daily sacrifice. Now, don't misunderstand that. We're not saying a sacrifice for sin, but all of us need to be a daily sacrifice to Christ. I know how important this role is, and I'm not going to give it half my heart. And indeed, that is what God has put in my heart in order to live this role out. Now, in Revelation 3, what God says is that he's going to spare this lampstand from the hour of trial and testing that he's going to bring on the entire earth. So we know that the witnesses come at the beginning of the 7-year period. Anybody who tries to tell you that they come at the last minute does not know the word. Amos told us that God he does nothing without sending his prophets first. We already know from the word that the people of the end times are going to kill his prophets and then the Antichrist will rise. We know these things. And yet there are so many doctrines that just contradict the entire heart of God. So what I have understood about these 1260 days is that I need to give my heart each and every day. Each and every day matters. That's why he numbered them. Or at least part of the reason he numbered them. Would you tell me 1260 days? I'm going to look at that and I'm going to say, okay, 1260 days. That means every day I got to be a sacrifice. So I have done that. I have sat before the Lord every single day. I've had something to share with you. But as time has gone on, the crushing has gotten deeper and harder. And the testimony has been harder to share. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I feel so broken and so vulnerable that the testimony has gotten harder to share, because there are things that God has promised me directly and in his word that he's not fulfilled yet. And it is incredibly vulnerable to share with you when I'm in this position of him not having fulfilled it yet. How do you think that Gideon felt being told to take 32,000 men and reduce them down to 300 of men lapping water like dogs, which is a kind of a funny, goofy way to drink water? Not like cup it and sip it, but lap it like a dog in your hand. So, I mean, I'm reading this and I'm kind of thinking, okay, these guys are kind of goofy. They're like lapping water like dogs. This is your army? 300 men who drink like dogs? How do you think that Gideon felt? And so it's very kind of God to, send him a friend, or send him, this man who's telling his friend, I had a dream, a round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. And then Gideon receives that confirmation. Okay, God has done this. It's going to be okay. The reason I have this insight, I want you to understand this, because a lot of times we read this and we kind of take the story at face value. But the reason why I lean into it even more is because I don't have other people. I don't know who the rest of the 144,000 are. And I don't have any living examples of what I have given up in order to do what I'm doing. The only examples I have are in the Bible. And I need those examples every single day. I need those examples because I am so broken. I am so crushed in what God has me doing that I need to know that this is biblical, because I have made decisions that I didn't want to make, guys. I didn't want to give up 3 careers that I had spent so many years building. I was in a position where I was semi-retired. My staff were making the bread and butter, like literally on 2 mortgages, one for a building and one for my house. That's a lot of money. And that is a lot of trust to place in God. I also had a retirement and savings that I have now lived on. When God told me that what I was doing was not of him, when he showed me what the field of science is, and that the field of psychology in which I had my career, received my degree, attempts to replace him. There's no such thing as Christian psychology or Christian therapist. That's an oxymoron. You're either a shepherd who is not making a marketplace of God, by the way, and shepherds people to Christ, or you're not serving him. And so I went from all of that to him telling me, okay, this niche that you have that has given you so much status and glory and money, this is not of me. I've proven myself to you. What's it going to be? All right, these contracts that you have with these facilities, they're doing things that are not of me. They're pouring medications down the throats of these older adults for money. I am the Lord who heals. Cancel those contracts. Discontinue it. You cannot be connected to this anymore. Now, Carrie Ann, you see that when you're working with people who are paying you as a psychologist, even though you're teaching them what's in the Bible, the fact that they pay you, you see that they feel entitled to you telling them what they want to hear. And when you don't, they don't want to work with you, even while calling themselves Christian, even while talking about how much they love Jesus. You can't continue to work in that field. Your board is not going to allow you to speak what you speak. I've proven myself to you. What's it going to be? He slowly stripped me of everything. And this is 100% biblical. Did he not tell the rich man, go and sell all the things that you have and give the money to the poor and then come and follow me? Carrie Ann, those shoes that you have in your closet, you know, some of those that could feed a family for a month on one pair of shoes, those need to go. Get rid of them now. Do you know I had so much trouble getting rid of some of those shoes? I had to set them on my console until I could, and then pray, Lord, I'm willing to do this much right now. I need you to move my heart. I will get rid of these shoes, but right now this is all I can do is pull the shoes out of the closet and set them on my console. Bring my heart the rest of the way. Carry on the clothes. You can't wear these clothes. You cannot be dressed in this. The jewelry, the handbags. Also, you're still getting your hair done and your nails done. You need to be dressed in the righteous acts of my people. You cannot be dressed in the world. So you're going to give these clothes away and you're going to buy inexpensive clothes. I've proven myself. What's it going to be? Okay, so I did all of these things. And I cashed out my retirement. I lived on my savings first. Then I cashed out my retirement. I spent every single day writing those books until the day that they were published, receiving the building that God was doing in me on a daily basis. God would say, all right, this is what you're going to do. He would convict me. He would talk with me. I would, do my journaling. He would build it in me first. And then he would tell me, now write it down and put it in the book. Is that biblical? Take the plank out of your eye so that you can help your brother take the speck out of his. Jesus, having been tempted in every way, tested in every way, able to help us because of that. Is this the pattern of God or not? Because in the field of psychology, I remember people saying, well, I don't have to be schizophrenic to help a schizophrenic. Okay, but you have to have some sort of life experience in order to help another person. And God's pattern is that the life experience that you have is going to serve him, not yourself. That honestly is just a pompous, arrogant attitude that I can read a book and then I'll understand everything that's going on with you. And I'll be able to tell you about you better than you know about you. And we're not even going to talk about what God knows about you, because how will I make my money if I send you to God? Right? I mean, ultimately, that's the mentality of doctors. That person needs to have some sort of dependence on you in order for you to be making any money. And, you might not realize that when you're doing it. I'm not trying to say that I think that everybody realizes that. But when you do, then you have to let it go, don't you? When God makes you realize it, when he makes you realize what you've been doing, gives you the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and the heart to understand him and his ways. And what you've been doing, our righteousness are dirty rags before him. When he gives you that understanding to know what you've been doing, it has to go. I don't know why that is going to be so hard. If God gives you the eyes to see, it's gone. If you really believe in God. And listen, I'm just as human as anyone else. I told you that I had to set those shoes on my console and ask God to take my heart the rest of the way. And he did. I'm not saying that anybody is, I don't even think that it would be right for us to do this in a robotic way. We have to feel the feelings. Otherwise, how is our heart being changed? Otherwise, we're just checking a box. So I know better. I have to feel the feelings of letting go of those shoes, because what it's doing is it's removing this part of my identity. If I just check a box, then nothing has been changed in my heart. So here's the thing. In the last week, I received word that my home is in foreclosure. I made a commitment early on, and I remember saying it on the video, that even until homelessness, I will do what the Lord has me doing. And somewhere along the way, I understood that he was not going to bring me to homelessness, but I think it was important that was my testing, that he tested me to see if I would go there. And then he showed me that this is not something that he does. He is not going to make me homeless. And I'm sorry, I keep losing this train of thought about the 1,260 days. Here's what I want you to understand. For a very long time, I would share every day, and it was right, and it was good, and it most certainly was coming from God. He would build me, then I would share what he was building in me. And not for your entertainment, but for the purpose of you understanding what this actually looks like. As time has gone on, it's been harder and harder to share the testimony, because it takes longer for him to build, him to crush me and then to build me. And because it's so incredibly vulnerable to share the things that he's doing in the midst of him doing this. I am in so much pain. And I want to explain that pain to you. It's not pain over losing things anymore. It's pain over what's required in our covenant in terms of demonstrating our faith. The testimony of the witnesses, guys, and that 1,260 days, what I'm coming to understand is that every single day, first of all, I'm doing something. Every single day. Every single day, he's crushing me and building me. But I'm also doing something, whether it's a Bible study, an assembly, speaking with someone on the phone, being used in some way. But the crushing and the building of the testimony are part of this 1,260 days. So if you don't hear me on a video for a few days, it's not because something's wrong. It's probably because he's crushing me and building me. Crushing me and breaking my power, which is what the word says. It says that the power of God's holy people are going to be broken in Daniel 12. So he's breaking me and bringing me to this place. Now, what did he do with Gideon? Here's the thing. Like, if he doesn't break... there's so many parts of this. I cannot even do it justice to tell you all of the parts of being brought to such a desperate place and such a seemingly hopeless place. But how is he going to reveal his glory? If I have this sort of backup plan, how is he going to reveal his glory if I have 32,000 men fighting a battle? They're going to take credit for it. And maybe they'll give him glory in the moment, but then afterwards they're going to be like, yeah, but we had 32,000 men. Maybe it wasn't really God. Eh? Do you guys do that? At this point, I have 2 properties that he has told me to hold on to. One that has been empty, really, virtually since the day I bought it. And that's the building. And that's the building that he had me remodel. It is the building that he has spoken to me through. Don't misunderstand. This is no longer an investment for me. My equity has been eaten up in that building and in my home. I don't have an investment anymore. Do you know why my equity has been eaten up? Because he had me live on my savings. He had me live on my retirement. And I have not been able to afford the mortgages on these properties that he has told me to keep. Does any of that make sense to you? It doesn't. It doesn't make sense according to the world. It doesn't make sense according to what my financial planner, or my CPA. It doesn't make sense according to anything that the world would tell me, except that when God tells you to do something, you do it. If he wants to keep that building and he wants to keep it empty, and he doesn't want me making money off of it, which are so many things that God has taught me in that building, in remodeling it when it was a dispensary. The place was filthy and disgusting. It's beautiful. And all along the way, he has spoken to me about what it is to take care of his house. And that's not his house, but he has used it as a metaphor to help me to understand. And then he kept it empty. He removed the people who were in that house, who I originally had in there. He removed them. And he told me, if I want this house empty, I will keep it empty until there is someone worthy to be in this house. I will watch over it. I will protect it. And he's done that. He told me early on with my home. In fact, this was one of the first things he told me. I set you up here. Because at that time I thought it was all my my business savvy and everything else, right? No, I got all of those accounts because he gave me those accounts. He was the one who set me up in that position, and he is the one who stripped me of it, and that's exactly what he gets to do. And that is the testimony that I am living out in front of you. So if some days I'm not able to share what it is that he's doing, know this: I'm receiving it. On a daily basis, I'm receiving it, and I will come back to you and share it with you. And he will move me to come back and share it with you. I am receiving mail from attorneys, mail from banks and lenders, from the CDC because I have an SBA loan, certified mail, regular mail, email, voicemail. On a daily basis, I experience this every single day. Every single day. Not on one property, but on two. And here's the thing. There are certain people who've been around and have seen and heard the things that I said, that I talk about. They saw me when I was sick, and they saw me when God healed me. They knew who I was. Okay? We're talking about character. We're talking about ability to see, clarity, godly understanding, godly wisdom, versus being extremely spiritually sick. I had a lot of respect from the world. I got a lot of respect from the world because of the amount of money that I made, because I had bought a building, because of my status, because of all of that stuff. That I had no wisdom. I was incredibly sick, counseling people on how to be well. That's weird. And they've seen who I am now. They saw who I was. They saw who I am now. There are people who've been on this channel since the beginning, since I first started this channel. They've heard the wisdom and understanding that God has given me, that no one is talking about. They've seen what God has done with me, the crushing, the breaking, in order to use me as a vessel. There are witnesses to what God has done. But these things that I'm telling you right now, being in a situation where I am in foreclosure on 2 properties, is outright nuts. It's nuts. And for God to tell me to hold on to them, that he put me here and I am to possess it, and he's going to do what he's going to do, I have to obey what he says. And I sound like a crazy lady. And yet there's nothing more biblical, is there? How would God have been glorified if the Israelites had, by the work of their own hands or by their own strength, been able to, or seemingly by their own strength, outrun the chariots of the Egyptians? No, God brought them up to the sea. They had no place to run, and then he parted the sea and then closed it up on their enemies. This is God's pattern. And there is a requirement for us to demonstrate our faith to a certain extent. And it turns out the standard is really high. He brings you to the impossible and asks you if you're gonna believe in him. And so this part is just so hard to share about everything that he has, all of the requirements that he has had of me in demonstrating my faith. And I want to share this with you. It's important. But first, I want to remind you that early Christians knew what was going to happen. Peter said to Jesus, I'm ready to die for you. And remember that Jesus said, are you really, Peter? Before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. But here's what Peter understood in that statement, that he was going to die for Christ. And in the book of John, Jesus said, the very people who kill you are going to claim to be doing a service to God. And in Matthew, he told us, don't fear those who kill the body. Fear the one who can kill both soul and body in hell. And when the two brothers came to him, and the mother said, I want this one on your left and this one on your right. And he asked the brothers, Are you willing to drink from the cup? Are you ready to drink from the cup that I'm drinking from? And they said, yes. And he said, well, you will indeed. I'm telling you guys that this is not a message for two boys. This is a message for all of us. You will. You will indeed drink from the cup that Jesus drank from. You won't be the sacrifice for sin, but you will drink from that cup. You will die if you are in him. You will be purified, made spotless, and refined, and it's not by a magic wand. It will be through fire, baptism by water and by fire. You're going to prove your faith, and you're going to do it with some things that are impossible. I am here to live out an impossible testimony before you, and I still believe. I want you to know that I still believe in God, and I believe in a God who does not deceive those who love him. He has not said all of these things to me to bring me to a place of ruin and destroy my faith. But he has required me to go to the wall. He has required me to endure the impossible and to still believe. I want you to think about Abraham. Abraham's been given this promise that he's going to have children as numerous as the stars in the sky, so that if he could count the stars in the sky, he'd be able to count his children. And that those children are going to come through his son, Isaac. And now he's been told to sacrifice his son. And the word says that he was up to that point, that he was going to do it. And Paul tells us that Abraham reasoned that God could raise Isaac from the dead. So it's not like Abraham was like, well, I guess it was a false alarm, Now he's telling me to sacrifice my son, so I guess that other promise, it wasn't real. No, Paul tells us that Abraham was reasoning this out. So I recognize that process, because you have to reason these things out when you're, making cuckoo decisions like I am. And you're like, really? Okay, so you want me to hang on to both of these places because, if I hang on to that building, then there's nothing to pay for my house. So now the one thing that's left that would actually provide for me, you want me to go ahead and waste that? Am I hearing you right, Lord? Okay. You say you're not done with the building. You say you're still using it. You're still teaching me. You're still showing me things. And that there may be a use for that building at some point. And you're not telling me up front anything. You're just telling me this is what you are to do. Okay. Yep, I will give you everything. I will give you everything. And I'm understanding that that's what you require. I thought I'd given you a lot, but I will give you even more. I hear people talk about this superficially. Do you hear the testimony I'm sharing with you? I have given him everything. I didn't utilize unemployment when I was allowed to. I didn't utilize government aid when I was allowed to, because he said he will provide for me. And there's nothing left. In my bank account, I have enough to live out the rest of the month. Just in bills, guys. We're not even talking about mortgage, because I'm in foreclosure and I haven't been paying my mortgage. We're talking about utilities, groceries. And I want to be clear, I'm not asking you for anything. If God put it on your heart, if he really convicted you, that's a different story, but I want you to understand that is not what I'm asking you for, because nothing's going to save me out of the pit that I'm in right now. This is something that has to be done for God's glory. God is going to do this. And it's the reason he requires me to share it with you, even though I don't necessarily want to. I want to because I want to be obedient to him. What I want to do is just hold my breath until he fulfills, or go to sleep and wake up when this nightmare's over. But I have to experience the whole thing. Why? Again, because just like when I took those shoes out of the closet, if I'm not feeling all of the feelings, and I'm not feeling the moments of doubt, and then having to remind myself, wait a minute, God did this. This is what he says. This is most definitely biblical. If I'm not doing that, my heart's not being changed. There's no way to get through this checking off a box. I'm going to be changed because I'm not looking back. I will not be someone who looks back. I will not be someone who goes back to that career, although I don't really have a career to go back to. But I won't be going back to that field, because once you see, you can't unsee. So I wrote down some of the things that God has required of me. He requires me to keep believing no matter what. He requires me to remind myself of all he's done. And it's not like I can write it down and then reference it. I have to actually pull it up inside of myself each time. This isn't like some superficial affirmation, like, oh, God did this. No, I have to pull it up inside of myself. What has God done? I hope you understand what I'm saying. Like, it's good to write these things down and to read them, but you can read them passively and not even feel them. When you're pulling this up inside of yourself, this is what God has done. You are being changed. You're not going to read something that's going to change your heart. You're going to work your heart into being changed. It has to be meaningful. He's taught me that he said this to me like a few months ago. I think a few months ago. Sometimes the time passes and you just don't even realize how many months have passed. But he said that I am not allowed to be afraid of man. I'm not allowed to be afraid of Satan. And I'm not allowed to trust man. Every time that the evidence is piled against me that my enemy is going to overtake me, I have to remember what God has told me. I'm not allowed to go and trust man. Because no one is honest right now. No one is doing good. And because my trust and my hope and my deliverance needs to be in God, no human being is going to be able to do something for me. He has told me to possess the land, even though I look like a grasshopper. Does that sound familiar? Do you remember that this is what he required of the Israelites? Go in and look at Canaan. Come back and tell me what you saw. And what did they say? Oh, we looked like grasshoppers to them. We can't do this, even though the Lord said, this is the land I'm giving you. So he made them wander for 40 years, 40 more years. I'm going to tell you something right now. I don't want to be here another 40 years. Not that I'm going to, but this needs to happen quickly, and it's going to need to happen in a deep and meaningful fire kind of way. I'm going to have to go through the furnace if this is going to happen in a shorter amount of time. I prefer this over 40 years of having my heart changed. Let's do it. Let's go through the furnace. Possess the land, even though I look like a grasshopper. He's taught me that he goes on ahead of me to find me or make me a place to rest. He has told me not to be afraid of man, no matter how much power they have. It doesn't matter that I'm receiving letters from the government or attorneys or banks. What can man do to me? God is in charge. You remember what Jesus said to Pilate. You only have that power because God has given it to you. So if anyone's allowed to do anything to me, it's because God gave him that power. That's it. You hear these things and you know that they're biblical. Did you realize that God was going to require you to live it out? To actually put your faith where your mouth is? Because that's what I'm doing right now. God has required me to remind myself of who he is and how he's proven himself, because he is real. And when you're going through this, that's the question that it comes down to. He's either real or he's not. Like, you either believe that he is real or you don't. You're listening to my situation, and my situation probably sounds really hopeless to you right now. Do you believe that he's real or do you not? Because if you don't believe that he's real, you will not be able to stand. Isaiah 7:9 says, if you don't stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. He's going to make a way. My job is to believe, trust, hope, and remember, because he has proven himself to me. Now, I want to read Isaiah chapter 7, because this is where God has been bringing me lately, over and over and over. And it's become very important to me, because there are a few things that he's been pointing out. When Ahaz, son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, was king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem, but they could not overpower it. Okay, I know it's a lot of like wordy, feels very wordy sometimes. Ahaz is the king of Judah. Remember that the kingdoms have been split. And Rezin is of Aram, and Pekah is of Israel. So these two kings have decided that they're going to fight against Jerusalem, that they're going to conquer Judah. Okay, now the house of David was told, Aram has allied itself with Ephraim. Now listen to what is said. So the hearts of Ahaz and his people were shaken, as the trees of the forest are shaken by the wind. They're terrified. Then the Lord said to Isaiah, "Go out, you and your son Shear-Jashub, to meet Ahaz at the end of the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. Say to him, be careful, be calm, and don't be afraid. Do not lose heart because of these two smoldering stubs of firewood." How does God regard them? Is God saying, "Oh, these powerful kings, what will we do? What will we do? Oh, the government, these attorneys, these banks, what will we do? I just don't know. Give me more time, Carrie Ann. I need to figure this out." Do not lose heart because of these two smoldering stubs of firewood, because of the fierce anger of Rezin and Aram and of the son of Remaliah. Aram, Ephraim, and Remaliah's son have plotted your ruin, saying, "Let us invade Judah. Let us tear it apart and divide it among ourselves and make the son of Tabeel king over it." Yet this is what the sovereign Lord says. It will not take place. It will not happen. What does the Lord say? It will not take place. It will not happen. He's the final word. If he has told me to do something that, by the way, I didn't want to do, most of these things, all of these things, I did not want to do. So it's not like I made a decision to go, be irresponsible or something and live some lavish lifestyle, and now I'm like, well, the Lord will take care of me. That's not what I'm doing. That is not what I've said to you. I've told you, when I published those books, I did not charge anybody for the books. You see that the books are on the homepage, that everything that I have offered has been for free. Whether it be workshops, phone calls, text messages, whatever. Any shepherding that I have provided, I have offered for free. And I have given at my own expense. I have made myself available for God's work every single day, not taking anything for myself. You remember that Samuel said that to the Israelites? Have I taken anything from you? If I have, then say it. Testify against me then. And the people said, no, you haven't taken anything from us. God says it will not happen. It will not take place. For the head of Aram is Damascus. And who's going to come against what God says? No one. For the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is only Rezin. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be too shattered to be a people. The head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is only Remaliah's son. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. That is a message that we need to plant that in our hearts. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. And it turns out that standard of faith is pretty high. It's a pretty high bar. Most people are not going to make it. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, "Ask the Lord your God for a sign, whether in the deepest depths or in the highest heights." But Ahaz said, "I will not ask. I will not put the Lord to the test." And then Isaiah said, "Hear now, you house of David, is it not enough for you to try the patience of humans? Will you try the patience of my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel. He will be eating curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. And before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings you dread will be laid waste. The Lord will bring on you and on your people and on the house of your father a time unlike any since Ephraim broke away from Judah. He will bring the king of Assyria." Okay, so there's the sign. What does that mean? I mean, think of all the things that God did here. A virgin is going to conceive and give birth to a son? How? He will be eating curds and honey, so solids, when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right? But before he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of these two kings are going to be laid waste. Sounds like crazy talk to me when you got two kings coming after you trying to conquer your land. They're afraid. And now look at what Isaiah is saying. Well, guys, a virgin is going to conceive and give birth to a son, and his name's going to be Emmanuel, the Lord with us. Before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of these two kings that you're afraid of is going to be laid waste. Does that sound like crazy talk to you? Because it does to me. And yet it happened. If you don't stand firm in your faith, you won't stand at all. This is the testimony that God is requiring me to live out before you. This crazy talk testimony. Impossible A year and a half ago, my daughter made the decision not to utilize medicine anymore, ever again. But in the birth of her child, when medicine was telling her this was a high-risk pregnancy, your placenta is failing, your son is going to die. And at that point, I went into the field of science. She went into the field of medicine. Her husband had gone into the field of medicine. I abandoned the field and my doctorate. And my daughter has since abandoned the field she went into and her doctorate. But at that time, when she made the decision and was 42 weeks pregnant, I mean, really like 100 years pregnant is what it felt like. And we didn't know what was going on with this baby. And she didn't know if God was going to require her to give up her son. But she did know that she no longer trusted medicine and the games that they were playing. She did know that God was pulling her out of it and exposing that field. And we delivered that baby at home. At that time, it was impossible. How were we going to deliver that baby at home? Her husband, by the way, did not go into, it was not an OBGYN. He's a physical therapist. I'm not an OBGYN. I'm a psychologist, or was a psychologist. She delivered that baby at home. That was unheard of, guys. Do you know how many things medicine told her she needed to do? You need this test, and you need to do this, and you need to go to the hospital right now and have an induction, and, all of this stuff. That was impossible. It was crazy talk to not use medicine in such a dire situation. God's been delivering babies for thousands of years. He's been making babies, weaving them together in the wombs of barren women when those women return to him. And yet we give glory to a field that says he doesn't exist. There's no creator. Oh, I've got to go over there so they can make a baby, put that baby inside of me because there's no other way for me to get pregnant. Do you see how medicine has replaced God? I got to go talk to this person about my problems. I got to take medication because there's no God to return to, right? No God in Israel? No God who is your healer? Oh, we have it different now. God gave us science. Never mind what he spent thousands of years establishing so that we would understand who he is and what his ways are. Oh no, God gave us science. Here's the thing. We can talk all day about our faith, but there's going to come a time when God's going to require us to put that faith where our mouth is. And that's what he has me living out in front of you. Please don't waste my offering. Don't waste what God is giving you right now because it's precious. And there is coming a time, coming very quickly, when God's prophets are not going to be here anymore. When the Antichrist is going to rise, overpower, and kill God's prophets, and he's going to go after you. And that's going to be a time in which you're going to be purified, made spotless, and refined. But you need to return to him now. You need to return to him before that happens. Because if you read Revelation 9, you can see that by that time, you need to be bearing the fruit of having been sealed. Because no one else repents. That means no one else returns to him after that fifth trumpet has blown. This is a hard testimony for me to share with you because I know that people are not going to understand. Even though the Bible lays this out, lays out these requirements, there are going to be people who do not understand the decisions that I have made or the requirement that I have to obey no matter what, even when it's crazy talk and it doesn't make sense. There are going to be people who do not understand and who are going to have certain judgments about what I'm doing. And when you're this vulnerable and this broken, the last thing you need is to hear people's opinions when they don't even know what they're talking about. And I want to tell you either way, like whether someone has a judgment about what you're doing being wrong or someone trying to process it for you, I want you guys to understand that. You don't do that. If you haven't been through this, you don't start trying to process what God's servants are experiencing. Your job is to understand what that offering is supposed to mean for you to be built. You can't tell people what God is going to do. You can't tell people how to feel about it. But I'll tell you what you can do. And what you should do is don't let the offering be in vain. Don't waste it. Go to God and discern it. You don't need to lean on your own understanding. Go to him so that you can be built for what you're going to have to suffer. Please discern this message with God.